Hi there everyone. Today I'm reviewing Nightbringer by Graham Mcneill and I'm splitting it from the omnibus. Um, so today I review a Space Marine classic in the form of Nightbringer. Either I've read this many years ago, so many that I've actually forgotten that I've read it, or I haven't read it at all. I basically don't remember anything, so I wanted to see if it holds up in 2023. The Ultramarines have a stereotype of being too generic and they're basically the poster boys for Games Workshop. So how much do the tales of Uriel Ventris, the Ultramarines captain and main character of this book, do to dispel that notion? Let's find out. So Nightbringer is a book that maintains a sense of foreboding throughout. Despite rattling through the action at a rapid pace, in the early stages it does a really good job of setting the scene. The world of Pavonis is led by several cartel factions, and one or more of them are fomenting dissent. They sense that since the imperial tithes of the world are drying up, now is a good time for revolt and change. The Ultramarines are sent to accompany Ario Barzano, an administratum adept, to investigate why the tithe has dried up. Of course, events transpire not to be as simple as that, as you might expect. Dark Eldar raiders turn up, and they're not the only xenos we encounter, as the eponymous name suggests of this book. And it's a mild spoiler, very mild I would say, but the Necrons do show up, although briefly. When this was written, the Necrons were in their more mysterious phase, as a kind of unexplored and unknown faction really, but it really works well in this book. The perspective is more that the Imperium just doesn't know anything about them, and they're kind of ominous for that reason. They're teased and barely mentioned until the very end, but it works very well for building tension. Similarly, the Dark Eldar are excellently done, now known as the Drakari, of course. Some of the scenes of torture are surprisingly graphic, and although it's not necessarily scary, I was surprised by how gory some sections were, and it's maybe not one for younger readers in hindsight. The inclusion of these xenos, then, is characteristic of their faction, and effective inclusions introduce horror, tension, and awe. It's really well done from a xenos perspective. It's worth noting that some of the descriptions of the Dark Eldar torture rooms and the Nightbringer are absolutely fantastic. And like I said, although the former is a bit gory, it really does help improve the tension and build things up. And the descriptions of the Nightbringer's mere presence implanting dread are really evocative. The characters in this book are strong as well. Ario Barzano is fantastic, and his twist later on, which I won't spoil, is excellently done. I kind of suspected something, but I didn't actually get it right, and I didn't predict it, so I quite liked that. He's everything you don't expect, but you kind of know something's going on there. And when it does kind of come to fruition, it also feels within the realm of possibility. It didn't sort of break any sort of barriers for me. Uriel Ventris is full of courage and honour, and doesn't seem to have much in the way of negative traits, so perhaps he does actually play into the stereotype, and you could argue he's probably partly responsible. He's not unlikable, but it would be good to see more fallibility and more sides to him. I look forward to seeing if this is the case in the later books in this, but we'll see. Mykola Shonai, the governor who has struggled to manage the events on her world, is passionate when things deteriorate, but you're rooting for her to get a happy ending. The same can't be said for the cartel heads, but they're not necessarily one-dimensional either, and they're great in their roles. The action rattles along rapidly but never feels rushed, and it's a great strength to support the interesting cast of characters, from Leman Russes and Leman Russ conquerors bombarding one another, to the Adeptus Arbites trying to stop full-on riots breaking out, to the Ultramarines smashing through or getting smashed by xenos. The Ultramarines feel powerful but not invincible. The tension of the potential outbreak of riot matches the story and the plot ramping up, and the clashes with the Dark Eldar, the Necrons, later on add 40k spice to the mix. The action is great, you're always engaged and you really want to know how it turns out. So what does Nightbringer do wrong? Well, not much, really. You might feel it rattles through the action a little too quickly, although I didn't, before it gets on to the next scene. but it also does a good job of signposting where timelines have changed or areas have changed, and have clear development of the plot that's easy to follow. And that's something that I often find not to be the case in 40k books. Uriel Ventris himself does come across slightly flawless, as I mentioned. He's good to his friends, courageous in battle, and the model Space Marine, which is perhaps the intent somewhat, as this book was written a while ago. So in terms of final score for Nightbringer, although it's not flawless, it definitely hits the mark in many areas. The action is fast-paced, dynamic and varied, keeping you interested. The characters are likeable or dislikable, and you are rooting for the good guys. Although, as any 40k fan will know, usually the lines are a bit more blurred than this. But it makes for a real page-turner here. Some of the descriptions stay with you, the Dark Eldar Nightbringer in particular, and make it a really memorable read. It also has barely any filler. At less than 300 pages, it was crammed full of quality, making it a 40k and Space Marine classic, quite rightly. So I'm giving Nightbringer a 9 out of 10. It's a really strong book, and it kind of sort of defines Space Marines partly. So I was really glad to sort of pick this up and read it again. And I'll be reviewing the rest of the omnibus, and I think I've got the second omnibus as well to read, so I'll be doing all those. So like and subscribe for that, and plenty more 40k reviews, and thanks for watching.